Good evening. Today is August the 1st of 2012. It's time for another Octave evolution. We just finished the autonomy octave, and we're moving on to the empathy octave. Autonomy is yellow, empathy is green. There's one thing I need to discuss, or at least I feel compelled to discuss as we close this octave, and it's really the final concept of the yellow octave, and it's perfection. I don't mean the elusive social or religious definition of perfection. I mean the actual understanding of what the word is trying to convey. It's trying to communicate the possibility of existing exactly as you were supposed to, exactly as you were meant to. See, perfection does exist. It exists within the individual's perspective of the reality of their own existence. See, what we've been taught to do, and this is across the board, it doesn't matter if you're spiritual or awakened or, let's say, unconscious and still within the society. We've been taught to strive for perfection because perfection is something that exists outside of ourselves, a standard with which we can admire and then strive to achieve. Very few people see the subtlety in that method of control. Understand this, the instant, the very second that you condone the fact that perfection is something that exists outside of you, you have then rendered yourself imperfect by that belief. You've created a flaw out of something that is truly flawless in order to hold up a sort of unrealistic ideology, to hold up a faulty belief structure. It's why advertisement is so effective, because the first part of advertisement is to first create a cause and then a cure. Create an insecurity within you and then prey upon that insecurity with an answer. It's exactly the same thing that religions do, but it's also exactly the same thing that movements like the Zeitgeist movement do. Academics do. Parents do it as well. They tell you that as a child you are incapable of understanding the reality of the world. That is a flaw, an insecurity. They tell you that you are ignorant in essence, and that they have the cure for that, their own wisdom. Your president does it. Everyone who's in a position of authority ultimately does so because they adhere to a concept of higher octaves or hierarchies of existence, that some are closer to perfection than the other. That's what the idea of perfection divorced from your source allows. It allows for people to get closer to than yourself. It's why there's a pope that still exists. It's why we allow the Vatican to continue to hold hostage most of the history of our species. Because we're still adhering to archaic ideologies. Ideologies that we know are false. If you view yourself strictly, rationally as a functioning vessel, as trillions of interconnected molecules, you'll realize that it exists as exactly as it is meant to, which is why you can think, why you can talk, why you can breathe, why you can move. And when you render that a proper reverence, when you see it as it is and say, this is good, then you move into the spiritual application of perfection and realizing that everything has unfolded in the pattern, in the way, in the weave that it has, precisely because you intended it to be that way. You are that which is, in all facets, and the only form that you can exist in is perfection. You are the model and the basis of perfection. Once you understand that, then you can see what versions of yourself resonate at your innate perfect frequency. And those that are still adhering to the ideology of flaws, you can help elevate them out of that false ideology, lift the veil, so they can see the perfection of who they are. That's precisely what I'm doing right now. The yellow octave is the gatekeeper. It manages all of the lower densities. There are two paths that exist within density representation. There's the path of self and the path of others. The path of self is pristinely represented within the yellow octave, within the idea of the perfection of the individual vessel. That is the epitome of the pursuit of the path of self. To recognize not that you are a supreme deity, but you are all that is, and all that is supreme. That there is nothing that can exist that is higher than you, because you are all that exists in every form. To love that concept, to embody it, to be it, that is the path of self. Now, granted, there are forms of the path of self which are in practice at current, which depreciate the art form because they're based on limited perspectives. The path of self, ultimately, in it of itself, is a limited perspective. It asks you to deny your intrinsic incorporation to the oneness in order to elevate the individual point of consciousness. That in itself is a limitation. The other path, the path of oneness, the path of collectivity, the path of allness, is also the polar representation, the opposite, called the path of others. The path of others is based on empathetic resonance, unconditional love, acceptance, allowance, beauty, pristine, majesty, incorporation, tolerance. See, the path of others is a feminine perspective of a interaction protocol. The masculine perspective of it is to shape all that is. The feminine perspective is to be all that is, and to allow all that is to take shape on its own. Most people at this point are capable of seeing the flaws in the masculine point of view because of its limited perspective and its dense outer structure. The path of self ultimately is one where you have to deny the intrinsic nature of reality in order for the paradoxes of its existence to maintain solid form. The path of others is much more fluid, and its outer limitations are elastic. Therefore, they are not perceived as readily. Most people think that the transcendent path exists within the path of others. That's true of the entire Galactic Federation of Light. It's also true of the whole of Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, New Age concept ideologies. Anything, Japanese social structure, anything that asks you to surrender your individuality to the idea of the collective, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all of them are taking a distorted version of the path of others and rendering it as the final goal. That is absolutely false. Keep in mind, these are polar representations of two paths that exist within polarity. They are not outside of it. They can't transcend it because they are protocols that allow for polarity to continue. They're intrinsically a part of the makeup of polarity. See, the path of oneness is limited because it does not allow for the individual to represent their own perfect existence within the organic light weave, to identify with their lifetime. It's why so many people who are walking this path are unaware of the intrinsic reality that is shaped around them. And it's also why they're pussies. Like it's why they're impotent. Why they're hippies. They hug trees instead of fighting to protect them. It's why they take vows like chastity and poverty and nonviolence, when wealth is a part of existence. Violence is an intrinsic part of existence. Sexual interaction is a transcendent part of existence. To deny any of those aspects is to deny frequency representations of your own individual existence at whole, and will limit how much of this life you can experience. The path that we are walking unfolds in octaves that build one on top of the other. The red octave allows for you to advance to the orange. The orange allows for you to advance to the yellow to the green. Until you understand your own perfection of self, you cannot truly incorporate yourself into the collective. You have nothing to offer. Somebody who has given themselves to a cause that is not their own, who has surrendered themselves to a power that is not them, is not surrendering anything because they have no idea who they are. The truth of empathy, the truth of collective impetus, of collective consciousness, is driven by the individual point of consciousness who is aware of the fact that they are the collective as well, and acts accordingly. My true empathetic resonance allows me to understand that I am all that exists in this current moment, and to, as a single point of consciousness, bolster the other versions of myself that are existing as well by telling them it's alright to be who you are. Find who you are and pursue that to its perfect level. Accentuate yourself, intensify yourself, seek potency, and then we will share it together. That is empathy. That is the active component of the path of one. That's where it is useful. The path of self is useful because it allows you to interact with all that is and to shape your world. It gives you responsibility for shaping the existence that is intrinsically your outgrowth. See, that's the intrinsic failing of the path of others, is that it leaves you without a sense of where I exist within the whole. Whereas social relationships are supposed to define the individual to the collective to the whole, the path of others only defines the collective and the whole, saying that there's no individual. Path of self only says that there's the individual and the whole, and there's no collective. The truth of it is, there's the individual as it relates to the collective, as it relates to the whole, but you are that which is aware of the individual perspective, the collective perspective, and the whole perspective, and can use each one according to what you desire in a given moment. If you want to seek your most abundant form, seek the state of non-identification with all forms of the path. That way you can see each version as it exists and choose which one is going to be appropriate within a given moment. Sometimes it's appropriate for me to experience something from the perspective of the path of self. Sometimes it's appropriate from the path of others. Sometimes it's appropriate from the fusion, the totality perspective, which is the whole. But recognize that even the totality's perspective is supposed to get you back to the state of non-identification. It is a useful interaction tool, but it is not the answer. The answer resides with understanding that you are the knowledge and the understanding. I love you. Bye.